Okay, well today we're taking a look at my way of learning GarageBand. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and choose an empty project. We're going to be using the mic or line option because we're doing a podcast, so we say create. Next thing I want to do is make sure that all my recording settings are correct. So I'm going to go up to GarageBand and Settings. And I'm going to go to the Audio MIDI tab right here. And today I'm using my iPhone microphone, so that's correct. And my output device is going to be my Mac Pro speakers, so perfect. Let's go ahead and turn the library off, just so we have one less thing distracting us. And then right here, this is our smart controls, and I'm going to leave this one on. We'll talk about those in a minute. Next, moving across, I want to keep getting things set up for podcast editing. So over here under display mode, I'm going to choose time. And that's this drop-down menu here, and choose time. Then I'm going to turn my countdown off and my metronome off. All right, moving down here into our recording area, I'm going to name this first audio track. So to name it, I double-click where it says Audio 1, and I'm going to name this Voiceover. Then I'm going to create a second track, so I'm going to do Control, New Audio Track, and I'm going to change this track to Music Bed. Name it Music Bed, I should say. Next, I'm going to control and right click, configure track header. So I'm going to control and right click here. This is called my track header. I'm going to click, control click or right click and configure track header. And I'm going to turn record enable on. And now we're set up to start working on our podcast. So first thing we want to do is record a voiceover. And to do that, I'm going to first select my voiceover track. Then I'm going to arm the track here by clicking the record enabled button. That just tells GarageBand that when I want to record the track, I want to record it here when I start recording. Down here, I'm going to look at my settings. Ignore all of this controls and fancy stuff over here, but do look here. Because I'm using my iPhone, I don't have the ability to set a record level. That's done on the iPhone. But if I was to choose a different input, I would have record level here. Here's monitoring. If you're wearing headphones, which I recommend, you could turn monitoring on, and then you would hear yourself as you're talking into the microphone, which can be helpful. It's the way the professionals do it, if you will. Feedback protection, I actually just stay right away from that. That allows you to basically record live, listen to yourself through your speakers, and in theory, not create feedback. Just wear good headphones, and this won't be a problem. Okay, so now that I've checked, made sure I'm recording from the source I'm expecting, which is my iPhone, I'm going to go ahead and pick up my iPhone, put it close to my mouth, and I'm going to get ready to record. I'm going to hit the big red record button up here at the top, and I'm going to start recording a voiceover for my podcast. Now, I can say a lot of things in this, but probably the best thing to say is, well, hello and welcome to my podcast. And then I can hit the space bar to stop recording. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and recorded an intro, let's go ahead and edit that intro. Well, first thing is, I know that the part that I said, welcome to my podcast, is the only part of all this jibber jabber that I want to keep. Just to make sure I know where it is, this is called a playhead. I'm going to move the playhead and position it just before where I'm pretty sure it is and play it back. Well, hello and welcome to my podcast. That's exactly what I want. So to actually shrink my track down to just the part where I say hello and welcome to my podcast, at the bottom, if you look, I should say, if you go to the end of your clip and you hover towards the bottom, you're going to see sort of a bracket symbol here. If I click and drag my clip at the bracket symbol, I can actually just shorten it. So I'm just dragging it backwards and doing a length change and bringing it right up to where I stop saying hello and welcome to my podcast. Now, the other way I can cut this is I can put my playhead right here in front of where I say welcome to my podcast, and I can go Command T, and that cuts it. And then I can just select the clip before it. None of this I want, it's just me sort of talking to you. So I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard and remove that. And now all I have is, well, hello and welcome to my podcast. Perfect. Now if I want to move this track around, I can click up here at the top and I can drag it around. So now that we've done some quick editing, the next thing I want to do is sort of punch up my vocal. That is, make it sound a little fancier, a little more radio-like. And so to do that, I'm going to go to the left-hand corner and turn on that library button. Click on the library button. The shortcut for that is Y, by the way. The letter Y, not the question Y. When I click that, I now get this option of library. This is library. I think it should say effects library because that's what this is effects library. It says search sounds. Their terminology is throwing me. But basically what we're doing here is adding a vocal effect to make our voice sound a little crisper. Now you can play around with these all you want, but I'm going to go ahead, first of all, make sure I've selected the track I want to apply the effect to, and I have. I've selected my voiceover track. I can tell because it's a lighter color here. Then I go to voice, and I'm going to go to bright vocal. And instantly, if you looked carefully, you might have even noticed down here these buttons all changed. This preset gives me a bright vocal. If I play it back, well, hello and welcome to my podcast. Sounds a little brighter. If you don't believe me that it changed things, I'm going to go ahead and choose telephone vocal. Now let's play it back again. Well, hello and welcome to my podcast. See what I mean? It's totally changing how your clip sounds. Okay, so now let's have a little fun and add some intro music to our podcast. Now, this isn't the only way you can add intro music. You can drag in other audio clips. You can do it a lot of different ways. But I like doing it this way just because it's a quick and easy way to get started and show you a few other things that I really like about GarageBand and podcast production. So I'm going to go over here to my loops menu, top right-hand corner, go to my loops browser, I guess is what they really want me to call it. And I get a ton of loops here. Now, most of these are grayed out. They haven't been downloaded, but just so you know, there's a little download button here, and you can go ahead and download any of these loops. And they're basically just different sounds that you can use in your project. That's one. I'm going to narrow it down by clicking genre and choosing country. And I'm going to choose front porch dobro, which I think makes a nice beginning sound to a podcast. All right, I get it. We've heard it. So now that I've found the loop track that I want to use, and again, any of these you can use, and feel free to download some more, see what feels right to you. But I like this loop, front porch dobro number 1, so I'm going to go ahead and grab it and drag it over to my music bed track, and then let go. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and play that back. Well, hello and welcome to my podcast. Oh, look, my telephone effect is still on there. Well, whatever. All right, so that's a start. There's a little bit more we want to do. First, I want to show you that before we talked about, here's a button that lets you drag the clip out. Up top here, if I grab here and drag, it's looping the track, and it lets me loop this over and over again. So this can be really helpful as a filler, for example. Just loops over and over again underneath. I think that's a few too many loops, so I'm going to drag it back here, maybe around here. Okay, so a couple of things. I've noticed I've got my intro here, and that's fine. But my intro feels a little quiet. So in a second, I'm going to show you how to boost and adjust levels. But first of all, go ahead, grab a loop, bring it in, and play around and experiment with that just a little bit. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about is mixing. And that is just the process of adjusting the audio levels in each of your track to meet your ears, to be what you want them to sound like. So to do that, we're going to turn on our automation, and you can either do that by going to Mix, Show Automation, or the shortcut for that is A on your keyboard. Now when you first turn on your automation, it's going to look like this. If you look really closely, you'll see that there's a faint gray line, and if I tap on that, it turns yellow. And this is where I can actually make adjustments. So say I wanted my voiceover to be a little louder. First thing I would do is click right here, and that creates what I call a keyframe, and another little keyframe here. I'm going to put one here and here. And now I can grab this line and bring it up, and as I bring it up, it's making the audio louder. Right? You know, you need all 4 of these so that you can have this sort of stretchy spot here where it goes up. So you do need 4 to create this. Let's take a look again. So down here, let's say that while this opening soundtrack is playing for my podcast, I want to get a little quieter when I talk. So once again, I'm going to click on this line. It turns yellow. And I'm going to align my playhead so that I'm right where it starts here. Okay, and I want to fade the audio down here. So first I'm going to click right here, and that creates the point where I want the fade to begin. And I click right here, it creates the point where I want to stop fading out. And then I'm going to create one here, and this is the point where I want it to start fading back in after I'm done talking above. And I'm going to add one more here. Now I just grab the line in between and I drag it down. And now it's going to fade the music out while I'm talking. Well, hello and welcome to my podcast. There you have it. And so that is what we call basic automation, or mixing, adjusting the levels in your overall project so that it sounds right to you. Once you start adding in these automation cues, there's a couple of different ways that you can work with them. So by default, these points do not follow the file. So if I move the file over to the right here, you'll notice my automation is still here, but the file, or what we should really call a region, that's the official term for it, has moved over here to the right. So if I want these automations to follow my region, to follow my little file here, I need to make sure I go to Mix and turn on Move Track Automation with Regions. And then when I do that, if I grab my file and drag it over to here, notice that the automations have followed along. Just did Command Z to undo that. So again, I'll show you down here. I grab my front porch dobro, move it over here, and you can see the automation followed. That's not always what you want it to do, so that's why GarageBand gives us both options. Now there are additional features that you can automate. I mean, there's tons of them, but for the purpose of this, we're just looking at volume. So if you want to make sure as you continue editing that you're not touching these automations at all, just go ahead and hit the A button on your keyboard and you switch back into this more familiar editing mode. I've decided I want to record just a little bit more to show you that you can record a little bit more to the same track. And so I'm going to position this playhead right here where I want to start recording the rest of my podcast. Actually, this is where the music starts to fade out. So let's do it right here. And I'm going to make sure that I have muted this track so I don't get any feedback from the music bed, or really so I don't hear the music bed looping behind me as I'm recording my voiceover. So I'm going to come over here and click on the mute button. So now it's muted. You can tell it's muted because it's grayed out. And now I'm going to go ahead and record another part of my thing. So this is my podcast, and let's say it's a podcast about podcasting. Hey, all right, so welcome to my podcast about podcasting. We're going to talk about podcasting all day long. Yeah, there we go. So now I've got this intro. Once again, let's repeat the same things we remember doing before. And you'll notice sometimes some of the tools that you're used to change when you're in the automation view. And so to shrink my files down, I actually do that up here. Or I should say to shorten them up here. Right. Or if that's confusing to you, just hit the A button. You'll go back to that window we've been working in. And then I've got my voiceover positioned here. Now let's go ahead, unmute my music bed track. Can't tell you how many times I've thought I've done something wrong, and it's just because I forgot to unmute this. And now play it back. Hey, all right, so welcome to my podcast about podcasting. We're going to talk about podcasting all day. And are you noticing that telephone effect is still on? I sure am, and it's annoying. So I'm going to come up here to my library tab, and I'm going to make sure that I change back to bright vocal. And now this is going to sound totally different. Well, hello, and welcome to my podcast. I think it still needs a little bit of editing. This music sounds a little too loud. There's a lot more we could do to it. And you can just keep adjusting with the skills that I've already shown you. But now let's make sure we've saved our project so we can move on. And so I'm going to go up here and say File and Save. And when I do that, it's going to say, hey, what do you want to call it? Don't call it project.band. Make sure you name it something. I'm going to do podcast training. And then I'm going to say Save. Remember where you've saved it. If you're not quite sure where this folder is, click this expansion triangle, and you'll see GarageBand is under Music GarageBand. I'm going to hit Save. And now the project's saved. As you're working and you do something that you really like, Command S to save. The system does not, it sort of auto-saves, but I would not sell that feature. I would just do a Command S every time you're proud of something you've done, and that will save your file. Okay, so we've done pretty much everything. Let's imagine that we love this podcast and we're all done and we want to share it with the world. To do that, we come up to the Share menu and we say Export Song to Disk. All these other ones are sort of red herrings to what you want, which is Export Song to Disk. Once again, make sure you've named it something that's helpful. What I love when, by default, if you've already saved the file, it automatically names it what you save the file as, plus the date, plus the time that you recorded it at, which I think is very helpful because you might have multiple versions, right? But make sure that this title still reflects you or your group if you're working in a group, because you don't want this to get lost when you turn it in. So name it after yourself. Trust me, it's super helpful. Otherwise, we can leave the default MP3. High quality bitrate is totally fine. And then make sure you know where it's going. I often save stuff to the desktop to make it easier to find. And then I say export. And that's it. I've exported my file. Well, I hope this workshop has been helpful for you as you think about making a podcast inside of GarageBand. If you have any additional questions or you just want to review something, don't hesitate to drop me an email at ckelly@bowdoin.edu. And thanks so much for watching.